Hello friends, Amy R here with Prairie Paper and Ink, back with a couple more cards for this year's holiday card series. And I could not resist using the new Holly Branch stencil set from Simon Says Stamp that goes with the Holly Branch embossing folder that came out last year. And I showed this in my last video, which was the release and review for Simon's Holiday Sparkle release. And I was raving about it and I was like, I have to use it. It was all meant to be. So I'm using Distress Craft Heavy Stock, and I was just showing it there at the beginning compared to Neenah Desert Storm. I love them both for their own, all the different reasons. The Craft Heavy Stock is just darker and it is sturdier. I just like it. I don't know. It's got a tiny bit of texture to it. But again, either one works great. Just prefer a craft because I'm going to use oxide inks. And I've raved about this a million times. I love oxide inks on craft cardstock. So because this is a heavy stock and it's got, more weight, I sprayed it a little bit more with water than I would with regular cardstocks. I just lightly mixed it with water. I stuck it in the Holly Branch embossing folder, and my preferred sandwich with my Platinum 6 machine is the original platform, and I happen to have 2 metal shims. Other people have used the cardboard backing that comes with the embossing folder. That doesn't work for me. It's actually too thick, but you got to use what works for you and your machine. So again, like I've said, you can use the stencils on their own or the embossing folder on its own. The perk of having both of them is I can now color these with the stencils, and this is going to be pretty quick and easy. These pieces are fairly warped because the amount of water I had sprayed on them. I let them dry before I start doing the stenciling, but they are a fair bit warped. So I'm just adding a little bit of pixie tape just to give a little extra hold while I'm doing the stenciling. But also at the same time, perfection's overrated. I'm not too concerned with it. Because again, this was so easy. I love it. I also love, I was originally thinking about, before I realized the stencil coordinating with this, I was like, this would be another one that would look really, really nice with the Distress watercolor pencils. Because I've already done a video on that, coloring an embossed image on Craft Heavy Stock with the Distress watercolor pencils. Love. This would look amazing with that as well. It would take a little bit more time, but again, use what you got. Anything. Regular inks would also probably work for this. You would just possibly get a bit of a different look. But again, I love how oxides look on darker cardstocks and especially craft. So this is a set of 3 stencils. So I'm just doing one stencil at a time and then moving to the next panel. And the oxide inks I'm using are Mowed Lawn, Rustic Wilderness, Lumberjack Plaid, and Walnut Stain. And I'm using my little blending brushes to add all of that ink over the sections of the stencil. And then once I'm done, I flip it over onto the next panel. Again, this is one of those things that you could do, just emboss multiples of cardstock and then do all the stenciling at once, that typical mass production sort of thing. So, because this really wasn't difficult. I spent more time just kind of fighting with it because the cardstock is warped. It doesn't really look so warped on camera, but in real life, I was annoyed. Which, thinking of it now, the thought just occurred, I could have just used one of my sticky mats. That would have been perfect. Stick it to a sticky mat, like the Brutus Monroe sticky mat with the stencil buddy. I'll link to those. That would have been perfect. It just occurred to me now after I'm done all of it. Anyway, it still worked. I just made more work for myself and then figured it out way after the fact. So I did the stenciling, loved it. The colors on the craft, just chef's kiss. So I did all that. I I dried those inks actually with my heat tool because again, oxide inks do take a little longer to dry. So I made sure they were dry. And then I'm going to add white splatter, of course. This time I'm using my Amsterdam liquid white. I've shown this in videos in the past and I just haven't used it in forever. And then it was sitting here and I was like, why not? I just haven't used it in forever. But white gouache would work. Picket fence, white paint, any of that, you know? So I used my fan brush, heavily splattered those backgrounds, and then just set them aside to dry. And while that splatter was drying, I did all my die cutting. And I'm using Simon's Seasons Greetings wafer die. This is old, like almost 10 years ago I got this wafer die. It's still a favorite of mine. It is still available. But yeah, definite oldie but goodie. So I die cut it from scraps of red cardstock, and I also die cut it from some of Simon's Crimson Glitter cardstock. So I did all that die cutting, and because this has a little more, like it's got the little dot to the eye and it has the apostrophe. So those I made sure to pop out, and I've just got a little pinch bowl. I've shown these in other videos. I have sets of these with little different characters. They're meant for spices, things like that. But I keep them in my craft room because they are perfect for holding little die cuts, little bits, all the different things. So I did all my die cutting. And then here's my Craft Tacky glue. This is my detail glue bottle. It's just a Craft Tacky glue bottle that I screwed on a metal detail tip. People have been asking me about this. I do link to it. I'll have a link to the metal tip as well as the non-rusting metal pins, because I just keep a pin in it. It's never rusted. I've never had a problem. I've never done anything fancy attaching that metal tip. I literally just took a new glue bottle and took off the plastic cap and then just screwed on the metal tip. And I can't even take it off to show you guys how I did it because it doesn't come off. Like, it's there. I might have to, like, when this glue bottle's empty, actually I would just transfer the lid to a new bottle. That's all I'll do because it just works. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated. But that's what I use for detail, you know, to get into little areas, and for like die cuts like this that are very, have little small finicky areas. So I just kind of follow the writing with my glue, and then I stack the layers together. So I did 2 layers of just the regular cardstock, and then the top layer is going to be that red glitter. And this is another one. This, out of the whole, like both of these cards, this was probably the most time consuming, and even this didn't take that long. But this is one of those things, again, where it's like I just zone out to music, or I've got a show going on, you know, that sort of thing. And actually I was zoning out to the Backstreet Boys' new Christmas album. I just had it cranked and just totally enjoying myself. So anyway, after I stacked all my sentiments, my card bases are top folding A2 white cards. And I picked out a sentiment from the Peace on Earth stamp set, and I stamped that onto the insides of the cards with that Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide ink. And my splattered backgrounds are now dry. So I'm going to trim these down to smaller than my A2 cards. So they're going to be like 3 3/4 by 5 inches. That's been like my go-to favorite size for cards for the longest time now. So trim those down. And then to adhere these to my card bases, I'm going to use Simon's Big Mama foam tape, because this will flatten these out like nicely so they're not warped. And it's also just an easy way to adhere. Another option is just to use the Craft Tacky glue. I would put, you know, Craft Tacky glue on the back of this and then like put my Misty on top of it or something just to hold it in place while the glue dried. This just ends up being a little bit faster. Plus it gives it a tiny bit of dimension, because this foam tape is nowhere near as thick as regular foam tape. It's still a favorite. Love. Have backup rolls of this, even though a roll will last a person technically forever. And even me that does, you know, a lot of cards and uses a lot of foam tape, a roll of, that's why it's called Big Mama. It's huge. Anyway, coated the backs of these with that foam tape, peeled off the backing, centered them onto my card fronts, got those adhered into place. And then for the sentiments, I kind of did it. I had the idea in my head, like I was going to do sort of the lower right. And I was like, oh, do I want that? Do I want it in the center? You know, where am I going to put it? So fiddled with it, looked at it, decided my first decision of where to put the sentiment was where I wanted it, was, yeah, sort of lower right, where there was kind of a gap there between the holly leaves. So once I'd settled on that, I'm going to adhere these into place with, again, the Craft Tacky glue. Just paint that onto the back of these words. And off camera, I had stacked the apostrophe with the 2 layers of red cardstock and the glitter paper, but the dots to the eye, I didn't, because those are just easier to adhere directly into place on the card rather than trying to stack little itty bitty tiny die cuts. Or you could just skip the tittle to the eye completely and just put a little gem if you want, or just not put it there, but I find it's just quick and easy to stack in place. Just dab a glue, stick down the piece of cardstock, repeat, top with the glitter piece, done. So I got the sentiments adhered, and then as my final little bit of embellishment, just to kind of pull out the white from the splatter and the card base, I pulled out these little Tic Tac jelly hearts from Trinity Stamps. I've used these in tons of videos in the past, and I just love them. They really do look like candy. So anyway, put just a couple of those onto these cards, adhered them into place with Craft Tacky Glue, and then I paired these cards with some red envelopes to tie it all together, and that finished them off. Tried really hard to show the texture and the dimension from the embossing folder. It's kind of hard with my lights because they're so bright, but it's there and it's fabulous, and there's splatter and that lumberjack plaid red and the red glitter and very traditional Christmas colors. You guys know I like to jump all over the place with color schemes and that sort of a thing, but there's always going to be a space for traditional colors because they're just fabulous. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have a supply list. I'll link to all the supplies I used, so you can check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!